Hi! I'm not going to deny this is exciting, and I'm loving it. Let's see if this works. Hello. So this, I've never done this kind of iPad walk around, a little like Fiona Bruce on Newsnight. Look at how she tweaks her eyebrows, makes her look constantly surprised. She has to say a lot of surprising things. Now, the reason I'm on stage is I know quite a few of you, but I did a lot of training for the BBC. They asked me to design their social media training back in January 2009 when that plane landed in the Hudson River and they went, Jesus Christ, we have no idea how we would have found that picture on Twitter. So I have trained about 3,000 journalists around the world, and I'm here to share some top tips. I've worked a lot with news organisations, but lots of radio people as well. And if anybody has heard me speak before, I have a theory which, to be honest, I should patent now, which is the suck and blow theory of social media. Because people talk about social media like a big blob. Really, it's about sucking and it's about blowing. And there's too much of that. And what I want you to do is think about doing it at the same time. Get this trending. So, here's a man and he's sucking. Hello? And this is all about this idea that on all of these social networks, we have more information than ever before in terms of the audience talking about things that we should be responding to, or at least remaining relevant by saying, oh yeah, they're finding this interesting, let's talk with them about that. So people are getting better and better at this, but still we're not as good as we could be. Because what most people think about when they think about social media is broadcasting. It's the pushing out of our own content. And managers in particular think this is really what social media is about. But we are not the only people currently having social media love-ins. It is Social Media Week in London. Anybody at a drinks party last night? Sorry, no, not that. But this idea of, oh my God, it's 2012 and we're still in this space of, it's all about us. When actually, this only works when it's peer-to-peer. We only are effective when the audience is talking about our content. If they say, you say, listen again, they're like, of course she's going to say that. She works for the radio station. If their friend Martha says, listen to Nick Grimshaw, they're going to be like, oh, well, Martha's not an idiot. Maybe I should listen. And that's the shift we have to make. We keep pushing all this stuff out, thinking that that's the answer. We have to get the audience talking about us, but they're not idiots. They will only talk about us if we give them good enough content. And often we don't do that. So really what I enjoy thinking about is the continuous breath. And any people here who are yoga people, like, at the same time. And if we weren't British, we'd all do it together. But we are, so luckily there'll be no audience interaction. You're fine. And the reason I say this is because we should be gathering content from the audience, because that process is also talking about what we're doing, and it's marketing. Rather than, oh, we'll take an idea here, and then we'll push it out 2 hours later saying, oh, this is what we've done with it. The process of working with the audience to say, what are you interested in? How can you help us make brilliant radio? That is marketing. But it's authentic marketing as opposed to just the traditional nonsense a lot of us are doing at the moment. So this sucking stuff. I work for Storyful, which is a social media news agency. I started 4 months ago. And we do this on a professional scale. So, for example, 2 weeks ago with the Costa Rica earthquake, there was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake. Within 60 seconds, the shock waves had travelled 250 kilometres into Nicaragua. Now, we have Twitter lists that we're constantly monitoring. 90 seconds later, the Twitter list lit up with tremblor, which is Spanish for earthquake. And what I love is that the ground is moving, but the guys were like, oh, I'll just get my phone out and tweet this. But that's what they did, and that's increasingly what the audience are doing. But we need to be in these spaces to find out what's happening. And what I love is it's either finding out that an earthquake has happened, or more importantly, if you're a producer, how do you find the right person to put on air? And a great story, actually, was from BBC Radio Kent. Quite a young producer, and when there was the earthquake in New Zealand, she did what lots of young people do, which immediately think, I'm going to do an advanced Twitter search, and I'm going to search for people who are located in Ashford, Kent, even though the earthquake was happening in New Zealand, knowing that people don't change their location. And up this mother actually saying, my son is in Christchurch, I'm really worried about him. So she sent her a tweet saying, can I get the contact details of your son? She went, no. Okay. But probably because she had a background in tabloid journalism, she did not give up. And she went straight to Facebook and searched, doing an advanced search on Facebook, and found this person's name, sent them a message via Facebook, and of course he was like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'll put you, I'll go on air. So 20 minutes later, she had this person from Ashford, Kent, talking and explaining this is what it's like to be in Christchurch earthquake. Another great example is from BBC Three Counties. Sorry, let's go back. Three Counties Radio, where they saw people tweeting from Britain's Got Talent queue outside the Apollo. And they did, again, an advanced search, found a dancer from Hertfordshire, tweeted them and said, can we talk to you? They said yes. They had her on air within 2 minutes. So this idea of how do you use social media for the sucking process, we need to be smart enough to know how to do this right. Because sometimes if we're the sort of people who don't actually want to be involved in these spaces, we just want to use them for our own credit, this can happen. Now, poor old Louise gets used in lots of presentations, and I sort of feel bad for her, but she came on the training, and the next day her editor said, oh, you went on that Twitter training. Can you find somebody from this Arab uprising? We need to put them on air. And so Louise, being a very good person, very BBC, said, hello, I'm Louise, I'm from the BBC. Please can you follow me, so I can DM you, to Radical Ahmed. But as you can see, Louise does not have a surname. This is her first tweet, and she's still an egg. So Radical Ahmed gets back and says, I don't really believe you. And this happens a bit too often, particularly journalists who don't want to let themselves go in this space. But actually, if a plane landed now in Euston Station and somebody was to send somebody a tweet, and somebody from Sky News sent somebody a tweet, the BBC person, if they were like Louise, why would you get back to Louise? Because Louise is clearly only joining Twitter for the purposes of getting you on air, whereas the Sky person has lots of followers and does lots of things. But this story has a happy ending, because a couple of weeks later, it was the Japanese tsunami, and Sue Llewellyn, who I trained with, she said, I've had my first proper person, my guest, from sending a tweet during the Japanese tsunami. Thank you very much. So all this to say is, we sometimes think about Twitter and we think it's frivolous. If it's used correctly, it can be incredible in terms of what you can get back. And anybody who's seen Minority Report, this is the future, people. We're now living in that space where we can go with information, and it's not too far removed from this, which is a station I was at last week, which has 5 or 6 screens. Because now we're living in a world where the amount of information we can get is mind-blowing. 72 hours of content put up onto YouTube every minute. But what that means is we can get better content more and more, but it also means if we don't listen to what the audiences are saying, we look stupid, because we should be able to know now better than ever. Hello, Mr. Clicker. So going back to blowing, I say in many times, part of the problem is brands talk on social networks in a very brand way. Social networks work when it's peer-to-peer and it's interesting. If I talked on Facebook and Twitter the way that lots of radio stations do, it would sound a little bit like this. Here's what you can look forward to today. At 11, I'll tell you what I did last night, and at 2, I'll tell you about my thoughts about the impact of the Olympics on East London. Make sure you don't miss it. Call me. That wouldn't work. Listen again. Here's me talking to my grandma yesterday. bit.ly/my nan. Tonight, I'll be talking about the hashtag US Open with @Jenny Wardle and @Ann Wardle, hashtag tennis, hashtag Murray, hashtag balls. Please retweet. We use language that is nonsensical for most of the audience, and we do it because we think that's what we have to do, but we're not doing it in an authentic way. And finally, this happens a lot. Here's a video about my holiday in the States. I showed the best bits in the pub last night, but here's an extra hour of footage that I thought you might be interested in. Tell me what you think. We do too much of this, and as you can tell, it's really not working. And I feel bad pulling this out for Colorado Public Radio, but I saw this the other day and I was like, yes, this is what the audience thinks. Here's a comment from Bob. I wish you would cut out the constant plugs for your website. Too many of us mirror on Facebook our websites. Facebook should not be seen as a website. Facebook is purely a conversation platform. And here's the main thing I can tell you today. Don't post anything on Twitter or Facebook unless it's going to be retweeted, shared, liked, or commented on, because it's completely pointless for you to do it. It takes resourcing to do social media. Too often people go, oh shit, it's 3. Anybody posted to Facebook? Yeah, I'll do it. That is not the way to be using Facebook. It should be embedded in everything that we do. And this is absolutely right. We post so many links. We don't post links as individuals on Facebook. We post lots of photos. We occasionally say, here's something I read. But if my friend Martha posts something that she read and says it's brilliant, I'll read it because Martha told me, not because Radio 1 told me, because I know that that's their jobs. It's about getting the audience to share your content. That's where it starts really working. And this is another thing to do in your radio stations, is to get everybody together, get a big flip chart and say, what works? If we think about our favourite Twitter and Facebook accounts, what works? And people are really quick to come up with amazing things. Oh, I love this person. I love Caitlin Moran because she does this. I love Starbucks because they do that, or whatever it is. And you have this long list, and then you say, okay, how many of those features do we actually do on our radio accounts? Not too many. How many of you would follow your own radio station's accounts if you didn't work there? Many of you might be like, yeah, actually, my radio station account is brilliant, in which case, amazing. But there's lots and lots of radio station accounts that just aren't doing what they need to do. It's just brand, pushing all the time. So going back to this continuous breath, how can you work with the audience to make better radio that is more relevant to their lives? And I think this comes just with general ideas, because radio people are much better at social media than TV people, because TV people have never known their audience. radio people, particularly local radio people, are even better because they absolutely do know their audience. And that's the question here, is how can we do this properly? And not all the time, but lots of the time, Chris Evans' show they're one of the best people in terms of using Facebook because they understand it shouldn't be about posting links. They also understand that their audience is very funny. So constantly they are posting things that are basically asking questions, knowing that the audience is going to come up with great answers that they can potentially use in the show. Because that's the other thing. All the research shows that they think you don't care about what they're posting. They think you're over here, you're saying, oh, we really care what you think. But they don't really think that you care. So the key to this is them believing that their stuff might end up being used. And so here's an example of, OK, folks, doppelganger time. See if you can guess which band the boys of Radio 2 are posting as. 161 people like this, 383 comments. And remember, every one of those likes and comments is making Facebook work. Each one of them is everybody else, their friends are saying, OK, why are they posting to the Radio 2 webpage? So if you're not getting engagement, give up. And if you're not getting engagement, try different things and experiment. And over time, you'll say, OK, this isn't working just because we're putting the wrong content up or at the wrong time. Again, remember when people post to social networks, it's the first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Are you posting at those times? It's normally 3 o'clock because someone goes, oh, shit, we haven't posted to Facebook. Another example I wanted to share with you is, Jem's going to be talking later, but this was from Six Music. They have the Now Playing on a Friday night, and they get guests in, and it's a really great piece of radio. But what's so brilliant about it, it's on Twitter. They have a hashtag, and the audience is suggesting songs and music. And here's a great example of Billy Bragg, who obviously is awesome. Just use the word awesome publicly. But here, he's working with the audience, giving little snippets and backstories. And then Jem did a Storyfy of this. And this is a brilliant example of added value. This is why we should be using social media as opposed to just, oh, we should do that because senior management in my appraisal said that we should start using Twitter, which often happens. And I needed to come back to Colorado Public Radio because I felt bad because I showed that other slide. Here's an example that they're doing in this election season, which is I Spy Government. So this is on a much higher level than doppelgangers on Radio 2, but this is an example of asking the audience to post pictures from around Colorado and saying, can you spy government? Because obviously big government is an issue during this election. Just a basic Tumblr site, but getting the audience to submit photos and then using the answers and the photos as part of the radio. So talking about them on air, feeding the beast, and it becoming a much more regular feature. And this is something that I talk about wherever I go, whenever I'm on some sort of stage. This is from Australia. ABC Open was an initiative they started because they realised that all of their content was coming from either Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne. And actually what they realised was they were getting nothing from audiences, and as a public service broadcaster, areas that they really should be spending time in. So they recruited 50 community reporters, sent them out into the outback and said, work with your communities to make brilliant content that's relevant to their lives. And it's audio slideshows, it's very simple photo galleries, it's them interviewing each other. And, 10 years ago, that kind of stuff the BBC was doing, but you had to go to a memorial hall for a week with a whole crew of people and technology. Now, with smartphones, this is much more easy to do. So it's really worth having a look at that site because there's a whole host of lovely ideas there. And if there's one thing to take away, is the phrase adopt, adapt, improve. It's 2012, nick other people's ideas. And I thought Scott made an interesting point there about, in many ways, he listens to other things but doesn't necessarily think that he's getting as many ideas as he could. In the social and digital space, there's some really innovative things happening, particularly in non-English speaking spaces, but we don't necessarily hear about them. So try and find out what's happening. Swedish Radio doing really interesting things. Obviously, ABC Australia, Estonia. There's a whole host of really interesting places. Take it and say, OK, that's OK, but I could make that much, much better. So adopt, adapt, improve, which basically means steal. And finally, the other thing I'd say is make content out of process. A lot of you are probably sitting there thinking, yeah, Claire, right, come to my radio station. There's 3 of us. We're on air all the time. Can't even get a sandwich at lunchtime. You're telling me to do this? Don't think so. And I obviously understand that. Budgets are shrinking and management are expecting you to do more and more and more. And so what I'm saying here is try and think about how you can make the process of making radio part of your social media content. So how can you, tweet about your morning meetings? How can you say, I'm off to cover this, anybody got any ideas? Or here's an Instagram, or the stuff that, yes, makes a massive difference if your computers are not running Internet Explorer 6. Sorry, anybody from the BBC. It makes a massive difference if you've got a smartphone, because it's much, much quicker to be able to just take it out and quickly take a photo. And it makes a massive difference if your management take this seriously. But, and it's a big but, If you have those things and you're able to just make this part of what you do every day, the results can be absolutely astonishing. And it shouldn't be the job of Bob. Who's got a Bob in their radio station who's the guy that does social media? Well, just a couple of Bobs. But there's lots of radio stations that still think it's one person's job. This should be everybody's job. And in stations where training has made sense and everybody sees this as part of what they should do, the results make a massive difference because your branded accounts are suddenly all about your individual staff. If your branded account is constantly retweeting the staff, it sounds natural, it sounds personal, it works as opposed to the branded stuff. Because if you're a brand, do you say hello in the morning? Are you funny? Do you say I'm having a coffee? It's very hard to make social media work when you're a brand. It's much, much more easy when you are retweeting your staff or your staff are coming onto Facebook and saying, hi, it's Claire, had a rubbish night. Whatever it is, it suddenly works because that's how social media works. It's peer-to-peer. So this making content out of process can make a really big difference if it's embedded in what you do. But that takes a leap and that takes management to be supportive. And you need to know that you're not going to get sacked if you pull a Russell Brand on social media. So that's all that I have to say today. I'd love to talk to anybody about any of these things. I know some of you are probably pretty advanced. It's hard to talk to people about social media because people are at different levels, but I've got a bag of case studies that I always love to talk about if anybody wants any ideas. So thank you.
It really heightened to me the opportunities we're missing, possibly at the FBS, and how we'd like to develop that in the future. So it's given me a lot of food for thought.
I can't believe that we've been here for about 2.5, 3 hours and we've talked about 12 or 13 completely distinct things. The format is great and I'm just really pleased with it. It hammers through loads of different things. You can barely keep up. It's a bit relentless, but in a good way.